Hello, Internet. This is Chris. We are just about to start. Let me see if this will. Oh, okay. Our webcam is not. One camera is not working right now. We will move over to here. Hey, Melissa. We'll move over to our interviews in the second half here. This is a what should we call it? A special edition stream today. So, unlike last time or the times before, we're going to do just like an hour of sort of demos. And I had a few customer questions that appeared in the last week about AI. And then we'll move into the Silicon Valley Reads feature, starring Rebecca Cohn and Melissa, you just saw, and then myself. We'll talk about the kickoff event and the books, and let me pull up the website too while we get started here. And I'll share my screen in a moment. Not that one. That's what we're seeing here. But you should go to this website. Was it SV Reads? Silicon Valley Reads. I have it in the. And for people who are, let's close that. Please let me know if you can hear us okay. Oh, you know what? I have to switch to the other camera so that that microphone will work. Let's make sure that's working. Oh, no, that one's muted. Okay, now we're... Okay. It looks like it does work, although it's picking up on both. Okay, I think we're good. Let me get my notes here. So we were going to check out some of the latest library sites, websites that have some AI tools built in. The first one that I had on my list was called, let's see if we can find it with a Google search. It's the EBSCO Mindstone AI Skills. Yeah. Will it load? So we are not subscribed to this one yet, but it looked interesting because it's from EBSCO. And I've never heard of this about Mindstones. Oh, okay. So this looks like it's a separate sort of learning platform that they have just they've with Pearson. That's their textbook publisher, right? Yeah, Pearson. Oh, this is kind of. Can we see anything here? Oh, they've got some courses. This relates to the other. Who was it? It was someone who stopped by VML last week, right? Yes. Yeah, they were asking about. We had a real life question about it was like ChatGPT specifically, and someone wanted to learn those skills. And I think so. The hard part with answering that one is depending on what you want to do with AI, we can kind of point you to different databases or resources in our books, ebooks, and our site. The quick answer is to check out the AI at Packle page right here. And we are updating this ongoing. There's some book lists, there's some other things in there. I'd say the best resource right now is probably O'Reilly ebooks. They seem to have. Oh, you know what? We actually have Rebecca, you did a blog post about O'Reilly a couple months ago. Yeah, let's find that one. We gotta search our site. I think it was O'Reilly. Did I spell that correctly? I did. Yeah, so I would maybe try this one first. I can recommend one other sort of general like ChatGPT chatbot. How do I work with that book? I've mentioned it a few times in past streams, but it's called Co-Intelligence. Oh, and I forgot to switch that over. Don't forget that part. Well, we've got 3 copies. We've got lots of holds. Notice, however, that the hard copy, that one is probably the fastest way to read it. I like this one a lot, but it's also maybe not for everyone because Ethan's main advice is like spend about 10 hours just trying things out in ChatGPT to see what, and off camera, Rebecca's gasping right now, but it does seem like a lot of time. But really for whatever you're trying to, like specifically what you're trying to do, you need to see where is it, like what are the limits of what your chatbot's capable of. And in fact, this week there was an update that has changed those limits again. So that is the new 03. Oh, I spelled that wrong. 03 OpenAI. We just got, well, the Plus accounts anyway, just got access to this one. A new frontier model from OpenAI. Of course, the other one that's been in the news lately is DeepSeek. You haven't heard of that one yet. It's kind of made some news headlines last week because this is an open source or open weights model. It's available to download. Some people have started running versions of this on their desktop computers. Sort of another shift in, how we can use these things. So there's this one that's out, very similar capabilities. If you don't want to use the DeepSeek website, I also just heard that Perplexity, that's this site, this is like a search engine sort of oriented chatbot setup, but you can switch the AI model that they're using. And literally like 2 hours ago, they just added their version of the DeepSeek R1 model to this. So yeah, it's changing rapidly. It's kind of hard to keep up. Oh, there's one more too. I'm skipping ahead in my my show notes here, but haven't been able to test this one yet. It's called Deep Research. Another one, actually, launched by OpenAI, but then it turns out Google had the same name for a similar thing, I guess. But this Deep Research one is meant for more like, it will, and I hate to say this, it'll do the homework for you. It does the research and kind of like goes that second level and not just, combing through search results, but kind of coming up with some of its own ideas and things. So we have not been able to test this one out yet because it is part of the ChatGPT Pro account, which is like that $200 a month one. But I've heard some good things about it. The way this is working, it's like it's a limited release right now, but then probably a month from now, there'll be some free version that you can test out. There was another one that we showed like a month ago, which was like a Stanford research sort of AI model. What was the name of it? It was some play on the word brainstorm. It was like, maybe if I just type in storm. Oh, here we go. It's in our, thanks, web browser. You're in our autocomplete thing. So I think this is getting kind of close to what this other Deep Research one was about, but this was using Bing search results, and it kind of wrote more similar to like a Wikipedia type article. So not really new information, but it was good at kind of digesting a bunch of search results and writing a short sort of summary of it. The other cool thing is you can see how other people were using this too, because it's a research preview. They have some other like samples in here. If you enabled that option. But yeah, there's a lot to explore right now. Let's see what else. Oh, so going back to our list of new library products that have AI built in, also wanted to highlight Consumer Reports now has a chatbot. And that's that was a surprise. You might wonder why did they do that. They actually have a blog post that talks about this. So I'm gonna log in real quick and we'll get that going here. Okay. Just need a active library account to log in. And it's loading. And let's see, where did they... I think we might need to search here. Oh wait, there it was. Ask CR beta. And let's see. Well, they've got some sample questions here. There's a few on the side. I don't know if Alyssa or Rebecca, if you have you want to try one out here and search?
We do freezers.
Freezers. All right. Maybe best. What's the best freezer to buy right now? Yeah, let me. It sounds like you're looking for the best freezer. To help find the right one, let's discuss your specific needs. Oh. Do you prefer a chest freezer or an upright freezer? Are there any features you want? Energy efficiency, noise level, power outage performance? Do you have a budget in mind? So this is interesting. It's doing some follow-up questions. I can say yes, that's helpful. Power outage performance, since I'm thinking about that because of the wildfires lately and stuff, you know? Yeah. Yeah, right. And we currently are in the middle of one of those atmospheric river type situations here, so. When it rains, it's windy, and when it's windy, the tree branches break power lines. So, okay. And so it seems like it's kind of digested some of the, the usual article text here that we'd have. What did it say? So you'd probably want a chest freezer because cold air sinks. And they're saying this one's... Oh, and then they have a best freezers of 2025 article. Huh. And their usual score system here. So that's kind of cool. There was I want to find. They had an article here that talked about why they were testing this out. Oh, here it is. Learn more. So what do we got here? It's going to search thousands of CR ratings and articles, respond in seconds. Okay, here we go. The innovation blog had some details. You know, how about I will paste this in our chat too, so you can read it. Oh, here, yeah, I'm going to skip ahead here. So yeah, the nature of search is changing. I kind of see this as like when Google started adding their own AI summaries, and then that's kind of, oh yeah, it might be a hype-driven bubble. They think the dangers of using LLMs trying to summarize unvetted information online. That's a good point, and that's kind of like I think it was a lot of the initial sort of like gut reaction from the library world was like, oh, we're going to get citations for books that don't exist or articles that were never actually written. And like that was a kind of a first generation AI problem where, yeah, the hallucinations were coming from it not having like a source of truth, like an actual database that was going to do its own searches. So it's and related to that. Sorry, this is a show of tangents. So there is another new one that I think has OCLC and all the WorldCat world maybe a little bit concerned, which is that open AI operators setup, which was again was announced last week, but you could imagine a world where you have a single search and then it will send a AI agent over to your 5 local libraries and search their catalog directly. And then we've kind of skipped the whole purpose of having a union catalog. Um, that's something that I don't think WorldCat expected. Maybe they're working on their own version of this too, but this thing alone, this operator setup, kind of a game changer for libraries because not everyone participates in WorldCat and not all records are always synced, real time with WorldCat. You might be able to get and find things sooner using that. Although there's trade-offs, of course. That's by using a chatbot, you're also kind of giving up some of your data privacy to do that same setup. Okay, I had a few others in our list. Okay, we talked about EBSCO, the Consumer Reports. Oh, here's another fun one. Let me go back to our website. This is, well, okay, let me show you how to actually, this is what I want to show you, but to find it over on our library website, you get over here to eLibrary, A to Z, B for BrainFuse. Oh, it wants me to log in again. Well, to save time here, they have added something new. Let's see if they mention it on their website. BrainFuse AI Academic Integrity Tutoring Service. Oh, here we go. Okay, this is what we're looking for. Article from like a week or 2 ago. I'll post that in chat also. Oh, sorry, this is a little bit small too. Let's increase the font here. So what are they doing? They've introduced, with the introduction of ChatGPT and other large language models, schools have become concerned about, yes, reliance on AI tools. This is meant to, help with ethical AI use, brainstorming, organization, critical thinking, practical applications. I actually I had someone, a school tutor email like a month ago asking about like, this actually answers their question now. How to use AI to help you as a tutor or as a learner. And these are, let's see, BrainFuse is like, I think they're hour-long sessions that you can book with an expert, through their service. It's kind of a, yeah, well, this is just the article here. You can read it in the chat if you like. Okay, one final one here. This came up today. Actually, it was, let's see, 404 media, AI generated. Yeah, 10 hours ago. So apparently there are some people who are not happy about the idea of AI generated books being part of library collections. And I can definitely understand why. It's going to be very hit or miss on the quality depending on when these are published and how they used AI to help. This article is an interesting one. I have to say I've only really encountered this looking at like I think I found a few in like Hoopla that looked like maybe they were AI generated books. I know this is a bigger issue in places like an Amazon marketplace where people can kind of like churn out like 20 AI generated books at a time, and then um they do have a return policy with those, I'm pretty sure, but when you borrow through Hoopla, that is a charge that is not refundable through the library. And so I'm not part of the collection development team, but I do know that we rely a lot on book reviews to help sort of sort things out like this. So I would imagine that's how we would identify like, high quality versus low quality AI generated ebooks like that. There's a section of that co-intelligence book that I mentioned a minute ago, the one by Ethan Mollick, where it is actually half the chapters written by AI, half of it is written by the author, and sometimes you can't really tell until you get to the end of the page. It's like, oh, that part was AI generated or not. There are some techniques around that I don't know if everyone has tried out, but the danger is, of course, like using these things and then you get a very sort of generic writing response back from a chatbot. But if you have written a lot of things in the past and you use that as a reference source for your chatbot, you can actually have it kind of mimic the way that you normally speak or write. So it's sort of in some ways it's not that much different than having like a ghostwriter or like a co-author assistant to help you with these things. But are they credited in the writing? Who gets first author, second author in that list? That reminds me too. There was another thing. What was it? Like a week ago with some sort of copyright ruling around AI, and that's probably like a whole nother 2-hour talk that we could do. But yeah, it seems like to summarize it really quickly, it was like basically if you hadn't done enough with say your AI generated images to make it anything other than like it was just directly copy pasted from that program, you don't get to own the copyright on that. So again, it's got to be kind of transformative. That's the name of the game with AI things. And then we're not going to talk about commercial and non-commercial use either. That's another whole can of worms. Okay. Well, I just rambled for about like a half hour or so. I think we should probably move on to part 2 here. But while we do that, we're gonna need to rearrange some stuff in our studio. So I'm gonna mute myself real quick, and then we're gonna switch over to our other area. We will be right back in about say 5 minutes or so. Let me make a note here in chat too. Does that sound good with everyone? Okay, all right. Let's go back to our be right back screen here. I can share this one over there. And let's not forget to mute the microphone. wreck. Okay, that wasn't 5 minutes, but it is working though. Let's see. I have some buttons here, and I'll switch between the seats. So we're back here in the reboot room. You haven't seen this corner ever, I think. This is the first time where we can see out into the library. It's kind of nice. Before you guys were always right behind me, like with that glass wall. It's kind of strange. So, where should we start? We have some. Well, I have some questions. I went to the kickoff event last week,
Oh,
so
fantastic.
maybe I'll save those for the end. But Rebecca, are you going to talk about some of the upcoming events and like?
Yeah, and I just wanted to talk about the overall program.
Yeah.
And I'll introduce myself. I'm Rebecca Cohn. I'm one of the librarians that's usually at Frankenada. Sometimes make a special guest appearance at our other branches. And I've been fortunate to participate in the Silicon Valley Reads programming for the last couple of years. It's a county-wide program. It's led by the Santa Clara County Libraries, as well as a joint partnership with the Unified School District. But Palo Alto participates as a satellite library, along with some of the other standalone city libraries like Mountain View and Las Gatas. So every year, the steering committee picks a theme, and then I've been on the selection committee, and it's our job to go out and find current books that are going to be of interest to our greater community. So we pick books for adults, teens, and kids. So it's kind of a heavy lift because we also have to make sure the books in print that we can get at least one or two of them also in another language. Hopefully Spanish, but there's a big demand for international languages in this community generally. We want to be able to have them as audiobooks and as ebooks. So even if we find like what we think is the best book, it's like, well, can we get hundreds of copies for all these libraries that are going to want it by February? So that's part of it. And then the other part is for our books that we select, our main books, we want the author to be able to come or participate remotely. So there's a lot of factors, and I'll admit that this topic was a little challenging because it was out of my wheelhouse to begin with. And also, a lot of the speakers in this have very high price tags. Their time is very valuable. And I am just so thrilled that the program was able to get Dr. Fei-Fei Li, because she's truly one of the leaders in the field. She's at Stanford. I want to give a lot of credit to Reed Myers, the director of Silicon Valley Reads, who's just fantastic to work with and works with all these different libraries across the county. Yeah. So having said all that, our topic this year of empowering humanity, technology for a better world, all of our books, we have the poster.
The poster up there too.
And everything I'm going to talk about is on...
Keep going, I'm going to just... one thing.
Okay. All the things I'm going to talk about today, all the events that are coming up, also a replay of the kickoff event. You can get to all those things at siliconvalleyreads.org. And the events are free, but some of them do have a registration that might be capped, say at like 50 people. So if you want to go, make sure you get your reservation in early, although some of the streaming things have a much higher cap. So I want to talk about, well, actually, do you want to talk about the kickoff first? Like, your perspective as an attendee?
So this was, let's see, last Thursday, hosted at De College? Yeah. Which is like near Stevens Creek, that road. It was actually really fun for me. So I'm gonna personal note here. I used to work in like an academic library next to a building that was very similar to the theater where this was hosted, and like it also had an attached gallery next to it. So this was, the kickoff event was like 90 minutes of Q&A with authors, and then they also had like book signings, and then they had this exhibit right next door with some of them were like AI generated things, a few of them were more like interactive sort of like immersive art things. There was one really cool one with like you hit like this, you had like a baton wand thing, and then that like triggered a bunch of bells that were like in the ceiling. It was kind of like surround sound type. It's one of those you had to be there sort of things to like really get the most of it. But there was like packed theater, um, and they had these like I'm forgetting the name of it now. They had those robot dogs that we've all seen like news and stuff before. These were a little bit smaller than I think the like it was like a toy dog, not like a not a German Shepherd, but like a more pug size, I'll say. But they were so funny to see because it was like I never realized how like they're very they feel alive because they're moving all the time. Unlike some of our other robots we've had here at the library, we've got like several robotic programs. These ones were more like they're always keeping balance, and they're like doing this little trot thing, which is sort of it just seemed like an excited like dog or something. Um,
So they were more animated,
Yeah,
maybe than a
but
typical robot.
yeah, but they were also being piloted by like the exhibitors there too. So it wasn't quite like AI, like they weren't like self-aware or anything, but it was very sort of like kind of like an odd moment to be like, oh yeah, those are they're becoming more and more available now. And I forget the price tag they had with them, but um yeah, for like a bunch of different, use cases for those like delivery stuff or like I don't know, obstacle courses. I mean, it was kind of a newer, forgetting the name of it too. It was like it was a play on October. It was like not October, but something like that. It's on the website, so you
Okay.
can find it when you're. Yeah. Um,
Well, and speaking of the art exhibit, it's going to
Mm.
be available until March 20th. So,
oh, cool.
yeah, if people
Yeah.
want to see it, it's the UFOP Museum at the De Anza campus in Cupertino. One of the words in the description of the show I thought was really interesting. Cobotically produced ceramics.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay, so you just reminded me because this was I got a lot of time with this one because we were in line for the book signing with Dr. Feifei Luke, and 3D printed ceramic like sculpture stuff there that I'd always this is another one like I'd only seen it online in photos, but like having that sort of just like I mean ceramics and the texture and stuff, it felt like I unless they had told me it was 3D printed, I would have known. And it had some really interesting like kind of they must have attached this later on, like some almost looked like ribbons or something attached to it. It felt very organic, even though it was like this is a 3D printed design, very elaborate sort of like patchwork going on there. It made me want to get a ceramic 3D printer. I was like, huh, I wonder how much those cost. And especially where it's a natural material too, it just like way better than like the plastic stuff, which is also it's not really sustainable and like it's kind of a but I think like I mean that must be the same sort of thing they're doing with like the 3D printed house stuff where it's like kind of more like you gotta let it set and dry and stuff instead of these I mean the 3D printers most of us have seen are more like robotic sort of glue gun type thing where it's heating it up and it's cooling right away. This must have to cure for some amount of time. I don't know. Yeah, that was really cool to see that and like
Good.
and they're very yeah they're like cute little like vases that they had there. So yeah.
Well, if you're interested, go check it out. Get all the gallery open hours from the website, but it will be there through March 20th. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the kickoff was, I thought, very successful because the authors really had a lot of common themes to explore. And this aspect of communication came out in all the books, and also loneliness. And then,
Right.
What's the intersection of communication and loneliness and technology? So, The Worlds I See by Dr. Fei Li, this is actually a dual story. She described it as perfect, as a double helix because she talks about her life, coming to the United States as a young person with her parents to study coming from China. And so, she's an example of a person who, if you want to say it technically, is an immigrant and brought an incredible knowledge base to our country. And I think it's really important that we, value and express support for immigrants at this time, because not only do they play a huge role in our everyday economic lives, but also in the lives of universities and research. So her book is really interesting because she worked so hard and had so much family support for going to college. Her family basically put everything they had into her success, and it was their journey as a group. So her personal story, and then her scientific story about how she views her work, this concept of having a North Star in your research to guide you, I thought was really interesting. And then something that, like, as soon as she said it, I thought, okay, well, that's obvious. I hadn't thought about it this way, that part of her work with artificial intelligence is vision, like how do computers see? Which, when we talk about the complexity of the human eye and the brain, and then translating that for pattern recognition, and then how that evolved into what's known now as ImageNet.
Yeah, it's and like the computer vision, I feel like that's been around for what, like 20 years or so, but it's really taken off lately with, like, especially the open source tools and things. Like, more and more people are getting to do, their own projects with this. I have to admit, I haven't read the book yet, so I don't. But
No spoilers.
yeah, no spoilers here. But one thing that Dr. Lee mentioned in the panel talk was how this the story that you're reading was kind of like, a mixture of nonfiction and a memoir, and like it has, which she described like a double helix structure, where sometimes the two things combined into
the points that they touch.
So. Without too many spoilers, can you give an example of how that worked in the?
I think, moving to the U.S. first of all, but then going to school at Princeton, but then her evolution of working with different researchers, and at one point when she thought about veering off into industry, because she could have made more money, and her parents said, we're here for your scientific journey. You don't need to feel pressured just for financial success. That, we might not have to work as hard, but, we're here for you to, follow your scientific dream.
Yeah.
And I think, that kind of support for anyone who, whether you're in the arts or the sciences or healthcare, to know that the people in your life are behind you and, want you to succeed. I kind of get a few goosebumps just thinking about that. Just thinking about, like, her, her commitment and her family's commitment to her success. And she is also, incredibly a very productive scholar.
Ooh, okay, you just reminded me of something.
I think I know what it means. I'll let you talk about that part. But also, she has veered off into industry for collaboration. So I think, like, if you look at the evolution of her trajectory, while she's been focused, she also has been expansive, if that makes sense. But tell me what you're thinking about.
Okay, so it was revealed during the panel talk that, yes, she's an active scientist, and yes, there is a deadline. There was a paper deadline like that night after the talk.
Yeah. So, and so she's just, going to come be on the panel and then get right back to work.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, maybe I can up my game a little bit. She's definitely, an incredible role model, but definitely, someone that, she has a rich life too. She writes about her family. And, the thing that also kind of blew me away is that, she has a huge list of scientific papers and scientific writing and memoir writing are different. But when she gave a first draft to a colleague she trusted, and he was like, no, you got to start over, I thought, wow. That must have been, kind of mind blowing, because she's used to, being in a very specific, like, writing frame of mind. But I would say the book is really successful because, a lot of times when you're reading or looking at art or a movie or an invention, you want, well, who made this? Who are they? How did they come to be in this? And that's, you get the best of those, both best of both worlds with this book.
Is this, so we talked like a week or two ago about, is this the one with the audiobook that's narrated by her? No, that's a different one.
That's a different one.
Yeah.
That's a different one.
Yeah.
Do you want me to talk about that one next?
Sure, but well, I'll switch to the one.
No, okay, well, we can go in order. So
Okay.
So the other author, if you want to.
Let's see if I got this lined up here.
Yes,
this one. Okay.
Company. So Charlie Dyaroff is new on the scene, and it's always exciting when you get a new author that their first book is really good. You're like just hungry for the next one. It's like, where's my next novel, Charlie Dyaroff? Because I think the way I read this book, and we all come to fiction a little bit differently, but she comes at it from a fictional future where you have this like high achieving but lonesome programmer who gets a job, and she's on the job market thinking, I'm going to go work for this company and my life will just be data. And where she ends up working, they're like, you have to go make friends. Because we're making a program that understands friendship. And it's interesting because the author talked about, how when she was trying to write nonfiction, her mentors and advisors were saying like, wow, this sounds really lonely. And just like her path, because writing can be lonely, right? Thinking in isolation, imagining a different world, but also that, once you start pushing yourself in a new direction, what happens? So this one, I think, will appeal to a lot of people. There's a lot of great book discussion opportunities for this one. There's book groups meeting all over the county, in person and in virtual groups. So it's one that I think, if you kind of want to like dip your toe in the AI concepts in a fictional setting, this would be a good one to look at, because it doesn't fall too heavy on one side or the other in terms of character development or technology.
Yeah.
So it definitely, has a good novel feel. But this idea of, how do we translate concepts into technology? It's hard enough to translate colors, right? What shade of pink is that? What shade of blue? What's the, intensity and the hue and the tint, and does it print well? And how does it look on different screens? Like, how do we take a concept like friendship? What is friendship? What do friends do? How do they act? And I like this idea of a character who doesn't have experience with it and has to go find out.
Yeah. And it's so strange too, because this was written, I think she said in like 2020 or so. So that's just before
the pandemic.
And and the loneliness that came with social isolation and that aspect. And then before, in some ways, ChatGPT, the tools we have right now, I've heard reports of people using this as almost as like a replacement therapist, or like a just a third party to have like
talk stuff out.
Yeah,
right?
just
brainstorm.
Yeah, and it's there's definitely some dangers with that, but then there's also, I think I've said this on stream before, like sometimes I want to talk about strange ideas, like
right.
and in that moment it's like, how do I get that idea sort of percolating in my mind? I have to, you got to get it out of your mind. You have to verbalize it. You have to either do journaling, or I guess in some ways this could be like another version of journaling too, where you're having it, like a journal that could talk back to you in a way too, because you could have it remember things from the past, or like give it memories.
Have to try to read your own handwriting.
Yeah, you don't have to. Yeah, which is my problem with journaling too.
Keyword search. Did I talk about this already?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that this theme of loneliness and communication definitely comes up in Mountain by the Sea by Ray Naylor. If you want to flip to that one. And I listened to this as an audiobook, which I really recommend. It's definitely gripping. So in the panel, Ray Naylor said that, he prefers the term speculative fiction instead of science fiction. And I can definitely see where that genre like opens things up a little bit more, because while there's definitely technological innovation in his novel, this idea of like, what if we're in this world, or what if, we pay attention to that part of our world. But when he is talking about communication, he's also talking about understanding other species. So I actually, I have a quote from his novel, and one of the things that like I liked and drove me crazy is that his world is so complete that he has quotes from books that don't exist except for in the world of his novel. I was like, oh, but I want to read that book. So one of the characters, Dr. Ha Wen, the book the quote is from is How Oceans Think, and he does say in the footnotes he based it on the book How Forests Think, and that some of the quotes he has is like, ideas he's gleaned from his readings and rewriting them to like provide some context for the novel. So this quote: "In the end, the factors which will keep us from understanding a species as alien as the octopus are the same factors that keep us from truly understanding one another. Imperfect predictions of what is going on in the head of another, misunderstandings compounded by assumptions, bias, and haste, and a pervasive distrust regarding the motives of the other as we struggle to understand and to make ourselves understood." So I thought that was really interesting because, human and animal communication, we all might have experienced on different levels, like if we have pets, or if we grew up around animals, but the concept of consciousness in animals and how we should interact with them,
right,
as a variety of other concepts and arguments that are implicit in it. But I think after this novel, you're really not going to want any more calamari. I think it's gonna be off your menu. It's a fascinating book. He also gets into this concept of technology providing some solace for loneliness and companionship, with the idea of this 0.5 of a companion that only exists online. So it's like half a relationship, right? It knows you, it knows what you want to talk about. It's like a whole, portal into a relationship. So it's really a brilliant book. If you think, oh, that's sci-fi, I don't like sci-fi, or I don't think I want to read sci-fi. It's speculative fiction, and it's a whopper of a novel. It reads like a novel. If you're like me and you listen to it as audio, you'll really not mind if there's traffic on your commute because it's just that interesting. So I don't want to do a lot of spoilers on this one, but it gets into the role of creating something out of technology, and how does it serve us, or how does it control us? So, and it involves a ship.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's all I'm gonna say.
Okay, yeah.
No spoilers. You gotta read it. So those are the three books for adults.
Yeah.
But the slate of things chosen for younger readers, I'm pretty excited about too.
Yeah.
So Farther Than the Moon by Lindsay Lackey.
And I'm sorry, I don't have covers for this
okay.
one, but we'll switch back to the view. So
okay.
I didn't disappear.
Yeah. She actually lives in San Jose, so she's going to be, doing some events around the county. And, if you are not used to reading young adult lit, like, prepare yourself. They are not playing around. Like, you will probably cry.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Like, she just really,
Beware.
kind of grabs you by the heartstrings, because her characters are so well crafted. The novel is so well developed that it's, absolutely appropriate for, I would say, teen and, early grade readers that, or middle grade readers that read at a high level. But she describes herself as a astronomy nerd, and she, like, all of her details about astronomy and space exploration are great.
Oh yeah.
And so the main character is this teenager who is also, science, space obsessed, and he gets to go to astronaut camp. But he's also really concerned.
A childhood dream of mine.
Right? Yeah. You gotta read this one. Yeah. But he has to leave behind his younger brother to go to this camp, and he and his brother are very close. And his brother has cerebral palsy, and is able to communicate with him, with a voice board, and they have always envisioned space travel together. So this gets into the question: when you build technology for someone, are you building what you want or what they want?
Right. Yeah.
And she answers that question very eloquently, and it's really good. There's some other side stories happening with his mom and his grandfather, but overall I definitely, I found this one I couldn't put down. And especially the main character's relationship with the other students in this space camp program, and what it's like to suddenly be with your people, but then you also have to compete with them. So a lot of good simultaneous story tracks happening there.
This is the wizard school problem.
Yeah, exactly. Right, right. But with, space.
Yeah.
The Wild Robot, you might have heard about it. Wild Robot, maybe the movie more so than the book.
Oh, okay, maybe.
Yeah.
I have to. I'm a visual person,
Okay,
so I'm sure if I see the.
Take a quick look.
Yeah.
Because there is the Wild Robot book, and then there's 2 books in this series that are out already. So if you or a young person in your life,
maybe what I can do is show the audience here. Go to the Silicon Valley Reads website and see these titles here.
If you love nothing more than a series, you might want to take a look at the Wild Robot. There's going to be a lot of free screenings of the movie around the county, including over at Rinconada on February 23rd between 3 and 4:45, part of our In Case You Missed It series, since the movie's been out for a little bit. I admit to being one of those people that the book is always better.
Yeah.
But in this case, I really do want to see the movie because the storyline is very strong. The characters are, have some endearing qualities, and I really want to see what gets lifted out of the book. Is it the same? Is it different? Never worried. The book is always better. For those of you listening.
Theater of the mind, as they say. Yeah.
It might be a really good movie to enjoy. I always then you get to the dilemma, do I read the book first or see the movie first? And they can be very different experiences.
Yeah.
I don't know. So anyway, there's plenty of opportunities to see the movie for free, so don't miss out on those. All right, we did pick a graphic novel, which I'm very excited about. Any graphic novel fans here? Yeah. Okay. So, and I really wanted, I lobbied hard for this book, I'll admit, because I really wanted a graphic novel, because those are often a good hook for people who are more visually inclined. And I myself have learned that I have to slow down when I read a graphic novel, because otherwise I'm reading too fast and I'm skipping some of the visual clues. So I enjoy a graphic novel because I experience it a little bit differently from just text, and it really, I think it's a very rich reading experience, because you have the color and you have the lettering, and then visualization of the characters, and then even the structure, the layout of the page.
The page real estate.
The storyboarding, it really drives the story in some ways. Yeah. So this one, I was really pleased, because I think any of these books for younger readers could also be books that people read as a family group. Books for parents and kids, caregivers, the cool aunt. You know? A great topic for people to engage in, especially because, and overall, we talked about this in the programming groups. Like, right, if artificial intelligence is all around us, what are we really talking about, right? Like, what are it seems like, when people started saying things like it's on the internet or YouTube's.
Yeah.
We haven't really gotten to breaking it down into our vernacular, and I think there's a lot of different reasons for that. But if we're going to talk, if artificial intelligence really is here or coming or available, it's like, well, what are all the representations of it, right? Like, what are some of the questions that we might be able to engage with through books? So with the infinity particle, we have
here.
Yay,
maybe you can
there it is.
at least see the colors involved.
Right. We have a cybernetic character that is aware and doesn't want to work for the person who created them anymore.
Oh, okay. It's like a
HAL,
sort of HAL 9000.
Well, ideas about ownership and free will
Yeah.
and, choosing your own path. But also, I really liked the art in it. Wendy Xu is going to be doing a lot of different workshops in mid-March all around the county, because she draws comics and makes zines also. So if you have more of a, what's the word I'm looking for? An animated or a graphic approach to this topic, those will definitely be worth checking out. We do have 2 picture books as well. Someday Maybe by Diana Murray, so you can include your youngest readers in this conversation, and also Artificial Intelligence by David Bedresky. And artificial, the ART is capitalized because something very special happens to one of the robots when he's being created, and it involves paint, but again, no spoilers. So some of the other related things that are happening, of course, if you're going to talk about artificial intelligence, one of the names that comes up in technology, there he is, there's Chip, is Sal Khan, and of Khan Academy. And he has a book out, Brave New Words, How AI Will Revolutionize Education, and then in parentheses, why that's a good thing. So as you might imagine, he's a little busy, a little hard to get. But he is actually going to be at the Computer History Museum in
our friends at CHM,
So, and this is a free event. If you want to go in person, get to the website right now to get your ticket. But it will stream as well. I don't think there'll be a cap on that. So, I think just in terms of, the higher level conversations going on in the county, this is a great opportunity for, us to know. It's like, well, what are people talking about in these companies? What are they talking about in these innovation settings? What are they seeing as a future? And then that gives us more things to think about in terms of how it applies to our everyday lives. So that's March 11th in the evening, 7 to 8:30. Again, it's free. You just need to reserve your ticket soon or sign up to get the link to StreamNet. So something that related that when we were talking about all of the programming happening in Palo Alto, is I talked to Karen Kienzle from the Art Center, and she told me about their current exhibit called Cut from the Same Cloth, Textile and Technology.
Ooh.
Yeah, so that is up through April 6th at the Art Center, which is also a free venue. Saturday, March 22nd from 2 to 4, the curator of the show is going to talk about textile history. And I was thinking about this just in terms of how we define technology and, how an earlier stage of evolution was being able to produce objects more quickly. but having tools that could understand patterns and repetition and take, the handwork out of that. And weaving, of course, is one of them. And thinking about all the, world traditions of communicating through cloth, ranging
Yeah.
from quilts to cords to embroidery, thinking, like the Bayeux tapestry. That, if we're going to take a really comprehensive look at technology and, the process of speeding up, automating, textiles definitely fall into that.
Yeah.
And, we still value handmade textiles. They haven't gone away. If anything, during COVID, there were a lot of people who picked up textile crafts for, personal satisfaction, enjoyment, relaxation.
Yeah.
So that's kind of an interesting perspective when we look at the impact of technology in terms of something, well, we still have a lot of cherished handmade objects too. Just because you can make something with automated doesn't mean, necessarily you're always going to or have to.
Yeah.
But if you need, you know, thousands of yards of something, yeah, you don't want to do that by hand. So that's a companion exhibit that was just one of those serendipitous things that came alive for us. Yeah. Oh, one other thing I want to, the list of events on the website is enormous. I mean,
it is.
But you've got a whole county worth of programming. So activities for kids, teens, adults, and then of course all the different aspects of AI to talk about along with the books. So one thing I wanted to highlight in particular, February 13th, this is a virtual event hosted by Mountain View Public, but open to anyone. So your Valentine's Day Eve, 6:30 to 7:30. It's called Human Empathy and AI Empathy. Why should we care about the difference? Yeah. So this will be a talk on empathy, ethics, and artificial intelligence with Dr. Jody Halpern, who is at Berkeley. She is a professor of bioethics and medical humanities, and also in the School of Public Health. So this sounds really interesting. She has a book out as well called Engineering Empathy, looking at AI and robotics in caregiving, but also the influence of virtual and augmented reality on empathy across differences. So, yeah, I have to say I really enjoyed working with Silicon Valley Reads, with Reed Myers and with all the librarians that worked on this, just because we were a little nervous at the beginning.
Yeah.
Because like anyone, I had my own assumptions and expectations about AI, and with any iceberg, right? Once you get below the waterline and you start to see just how big the topic is and how things relate to it, like you do have a better perspective. Maybe feel a little less grumpy about yet another technological wave coming your way, but also just taking this time as an opportunity to build awareness and do a lot of the kind of self-guided learning and teaching I think people who like libraries also enjoy. So it's a free deep dive already for folks February and March, and it'll be interesting to see what comes out of it, what kind of conversations.
It's gosh, it's gonna be so many ideas. I do have a list of questions here that were from the panel talk.
Okay.
But one thing that just came up that I've been thinking a lot about is like, in the same way that like, okay, the textile industry, changes in automation and mechanization, we still have handcrafted things that people value because it's handcrafted, it's done by a person. Is that kind of the repeating the same process with like AI art, and like, yes, everyone, you can type a prompt and you can get like an image generated quickly, but is that really devaluing the art, like the hands-on artist who's like
I
the
don't.
mastery of that craft is sort of more elevated now, I think, because it is.
Yeah, and I think in a lot of ways, art is about the personal relationship you have, either when you
Yeah.
saw a piece of art or you learned about that artist or how you felt when you saw it.
Mm,
Um, I think something that's not talked about enough in the AI world is copyright.
mm,
Because, like, where are all those images going to come from,
right.
right? So, like, ImageNet, they don't own the copyright. They use the image to build a
Mm,
database they could assign descriptors to, but that's really
mm-hmm.
different from owning a set of images. So,
Yeah.
when you're in an image generating software, like, well, where did the images come from? And if you think the publishers and copyright owners aren't going to crack down on it, just ask our friends at the Internet Archive how it's
Yeah. Oh
going.
yeah.
you know? So, when we talk about, when we're shaking the AI box, what are we shaking? Like,
Mm,
what's the data it's actually
mm.
going for? So let's flip this a second. Let's talk about iNaturalist, which
Oh
I
yeah.
dearly love. Like,
Yeah.
I could be on that site all day. The image recognition is incredible. You can take a picture of a butterfly
Yeah.
and, upload it like that. It's
Yeah.
going to tell you that's a monarch.
And so for folks watching who haven't used the site or the app, it's essentially it's like I think of it as like it's almost a it's like real world Pokemon sort of in a way.
Mm-hmm.
You're going out in the world, you're taking photos of things, tagging, you got a GPS location, like here's where I found it. I know there's some staff here who've used it for like, oh, look at this mushroom I found, and like, isn't that strange? It's only grows in this type of environment next to this tree,
Right.
but they're rare, and if you don't know where to find them, maybe you'll never see one.
And questions like, should I eat it?
Yeah, or should it? Yeah, they can help you ID things
Whether
through
or
that
not you
site.
should
Yeah.
eat it. So the part of the agreement when you submit to
Mm,
iNaturalist, and part of its goal is to create an open access
yeah.
collection of high quality image data. So when you sign up for it, you're saying yes, by putting my picture of this organism in your database, I'm
Mm,
saying it's open for any researcher to use,
mm,
which is amazing. Like, if you want to talk about big data in a monumental way.
yeah.
And one example is like with monarch butterflies. So if we can track
Oh
year
yeah.
over year where we've seen them, we know it's really an alarming trend. Like last year, there were like 250 butterflies
Mm.
at Pacific Grove at this point and of year. Now there's only 50.
Yeah.
So it's like, what happened? But to
Mm.
be able to find that out
Yeah.
within,
The citizen science stuff is really
yeah, it's
fun to.
amazing. But
Yeah.
again, because they developed that tool with the intent of it being open access, that's why they have all the
Mm.
data. So I feel like in some ways we're in a little bit of that the before the generosity gets clamped down on.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, before publishers or content creators say you can't just take my
Mm.
stuff. And I think artists,
Mm.
justifiably are worried about that, because that's
Mm.
how some of them make their livings. It's their personal expression.
Yeah.
You don't want someone just to jack it off the internet.
Mm.
But we already see that, like with Etsy, like people who create digital art and then someone else grabs it and resells crappy
Yeah.
versions of it. Right? It's like, that's not a new problem.
Mm.
So it's, right now, when like the controls aren't on,
Mm.
it'll be interesting to see. But once the paywall comes down and the rule books come out, I think that
Right.
there's going to be a lot more. I mean, the argument of ownership is not new to the arts.
Right. And it's yeah, I can think of there was one sort of notable copyright case a few years ago with like I forget how this ended. It was a selfie taken by a
Oh, the
monkey, the monkey
monkey,
selfie
right?
where it's like
That's the monkey on the
yeah,
copyright.
that's the monkey.
Is the monkey self-aware? Does he have an
Yeah.
agent? Yeah.
And I think with that one we said no, the monkey doesn't.
Right.
But now it's like, is the AI tool, is that, I mean, is that also not sentient, like sort of. I mean,
Right. And
yeah,
yeah, so we
we're
get
kind
into a
of
lot of questions about who is the creator.
yeah. And then, well, and the monkey thing is kind of interesting too, because like this goes back to that other idea of like, when photography first started, people were saying like, oh, these people are not artists because the art then was about how realism and like having how well you could paint, and then we had abstract art after that with the whole we're talking like early 1900s now. For folks watching in the future, this is like 100 years ago. We're talking, but yeah, it's just kind of like we over time we evolve these sort of definitions, and it's maybe in the future we think of like there's data and then there's data sets, and like that's kind of where we're like a large language model is kind of this new thing like that, where it only works because it is that sort of incorporation of all those other materials in a sort of opaque box sort of scenario. And this is one of the funny things about all of these tools right now is like, yes, we can say that there's like, there's node layers and there's billions of parameters and stuff, but what's actually happening inside those, between those nodes, we don't really have a good, I mean, we have some general ideas around that, but I mean, you can see like the way that having more or less parameters changes the output of the model. And like, that's the thing right now with like the whole DeepSeek open source models is like, yes, you can run it on your laptop, but you're having the what do they call it? The distilled version of it is less capable because it's compressed that information down more, distilled it even more and more
Right.
to be portable.
What are the finer points that you might be missing?
Yeah.
And I think especially with scientific literature, the sciences are notorious for gatekeeping their data. Companies like Elsevier, like I can guarantee you those journals are not in GPT.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah, that's yeah.
So if we're looking at what people, I mean, it's even like Google too. What do people think they're searching when they're searching in Google? Because there's just so much that isn't digitized. Or even if it is, like, well, what do you need to be in the portal for the census? Or do you need to be in the portal for the CDC? Or do you need to be in the portal for the Library of Congress?
Yeah.
Because there's no way one search is, harvesting from all those things.
Yeah.
And then, we get into metadata. Right. Do you know about the Citizen Archivist project that the National Archives has?
No.
So this is a great project. If you want to explore a big data site and contribute, you do have to have the superpower of reading cursive.
Oh, is this the? Okay, I think
Yes,
I know.
they have a lot of digitized documents.
Yeah.
But there's no OCR for idiosyncratic handwriting, say from the 18th century, right?
Ooh, okay, I had a grad school internship around this,
Right?
Which was it's not easy.
No, learning to read handwriting from a different century, maybe a different language, like in some ways it's just going to take a human eye. There's going to be some pattern matching recognition that's going to help. But they do, they are always looking for people to sign up and transcribe the documents so they are searchable.
Yeah.
Another example of that is one of my personal favorite databases, the California Digital Newspaper Collection, because even though these are papers that are in the free domain, so they're not under copyright, it is optical character recognition of printed type for the transcription. But even, printed type wasn't always perfect in a newspaper that might have, been set hastily, or did the paper get wrinkled before it got microfilmed?
Did the printers run out of that letter and they came up with some sort of like
kind of hodgepodge it together? So, that's another great database to know around and just look at the representation of data that's available too, because they're adding to it all the time as things enter the public domain every year, but still it takes time to scan and upload all these things. but
Right.
we're so used to quick keyword searches. And so I
Mm.
was really interested with the examples you had with consumer research, because
Mm.
having come along in the era of keywords and subject headings,
Oh,
to me, I would be kind of aggravated at typing out a sentence, because it's like I know what I want, I know how
mm.
to get it, but I can
Oh,
also
yeah,
see
yeah,
for my patrons who
yeah,
often like type in a sentence like how to start a small
yeah,
business. That's ideal. Like that's
yeah,
how they expect to interact with the database.
yeah.
So, I think as a librarian, I have to think about, am I searching it as me, or am I looking at a
Mm.
database product that someone's going to be able to use, without
Mm.
intervention from a librarian saying, now click here, now
Yeah.
click here. They can just go to it, type in a sentence, and the database is going to be able to parse
Mm.
that, which is pretty great.
So I actually have a real world example of this. I remember a year ago we had an e-help question, and someone was looking in the O'Reilly database, which we also mentioned earlier. They wanted to find info about electric cars, and the keyword in there is an electric vehicle. And if you search for car, they were getting no results. But yeah, that's this is one way that a chatbot could help kind of like to point you in the right direction, as it has it has reduced all of that language into math that is relational to all these terms that are sort of close to it in meaning. It's weird to think of it that way, but yeah, it can kind of understand what you meant to say
Right,
because all those words are kind of clustered together in that
right.
vector database that's working.
Because, we say EV when we talk
Mm.
about EV charging, but
Yeah,
if you went to go research it, you might be thinking, well, I'm looking for research on electric cars.
yeah,
So, yeah, that's a good
yeah.
example.
And different databases we have, some of them are more precise, or they will kind of help with that redirection and stuff. Um, yeah, it's just and I'm looking here at the Citizen Archivist site. This looks like another great sort of like crowdsourcing project that if you
Right?
have
Yeah.
uh, if you're interested in these things, there are ways to
There's
practice.
great
Yeah.
projects for
Yeah.
contributing to metadata
Mm.
and transcription. And then you get to
Mm.
learn stuff as you're
Yeah.
doing it, reading field notes or journals or
Mm.
letters. It's just, when
Mm.
they talk about consulting primary sources, you don't have to be in DC in an archive,
Yeah.
that's only open from 10 to 5.
Mm.
Having the digital access to the replica is amazing, but then the next step is, making it findable.
Mm. And to think that maybe your sort of casual OCRing at home
Right?
might lead to
Right.
someone who
Finding
a
something
year
really
later they
useful.
find that
Yeah,
that
yeah,
indexing. That's it's fun. Yeah, we're all in a lot of ways. That's kind of what the large language model stuff of today only works because we've had the internet for so long. We've been uploading all this data for so long that it
right.
can start to
Be
compress
put
and
to use.
yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to circle back to iNaturalist for a second.
Okay.
Because one of my favorite things about iNaturalist, there's so many knowledgeable specialists on it
Mm.
that the AI will say your organism is something, and they'll come back like, well, I think that's a fiery skipper, not the dusky skipper. I mean,
Are
and
those
they
birds?
know,
Are
and
they?
you can have that image up for like 5 minutes, and like,
Oh
boom,
yeah, yeah.
the top identifier of
Right.
skippers is like,
Yeah.
no, you got this wrong. So even with their incredible, image matching,
Yeah.
there's still room for debate about
Mm.
exactly what it is. But some of the fields they have, like I like to photograph butterflies.
Oh, okay.
And like there's even filters like, is it using its proboscis to get nectar? Like
Mm.
what's the butterfly doing?
Mm.
Not just that's a monarch or that's a swallowtail, but is it
Mm.
actively doing something? Like if I want a picture of a butterfly, forming a cocoon,
Mm.
if I want a picture of a butterfly emerging from a cocoon, I like that
Mm.
spectrum of images is, that's one of the things that they're working to do is
Wow.
get these really specific things
Yeah.
in there. Can you tell the gender? Is it alive or dead?
Mm.
Just all these different things
Mhm.
about it. So yeah, for me, the potential of the open source things is where I see a lot. And I
Mm,
know people legitimately have concerns about AI in terms of privacy, and
mm,
these huge lines of agreement text like click and agree because I really want this app, right?
mm,
But iNaturalist is pretty clear saying like if you put your pictures on here, it's going, scientists can
mm.
look at it and hopefully use it. And what's cool is at the end of the year they make you a little graph of how many new species to you that you identified,
Oh,
and like
wow.
how many of your images were downloaded
Mm-hmm.
or cited.
Mm-hmm.
I know, I'm up to
Yeah.
300 different
Ooh.
species. I'm so proud. Yeah, I know,
Wow.
it's like
Yeah.
very easy journal keeping, right?
Yeah.
Very easy field notes. But for like if someone is using a tool like an online journal, maybe
Mm,
you don't want that out on the internet. Maybe
right.
you do want it private.
Yeah.
Maybe it is better just to write
Yeah.
it on a notebook.
And
Right?
I'm gonna get on my soapbox for a moment here.
Okay.
This is one of the reasons why I'm so, is adamant the right word?
Yes.
Local large language models. We really need to look at this more because
Mm,
if you can have all of these same capabilities without sending information over the internet, that puts the power in your hands. It's not, there's fewer questions of like, how are they going to reuse my data? Will this thing change? Will it be available next week? If you're relying on that for some project or
yeah.
something similar, like these things are getting more portable and they're getting easier to run on slower computers, so you don't need to invest a lot in this. I actually saw an example like a month ago where someone had a chatbot running on like a computer from like 1998. Like they had to go through some hoops to get it to work, but like at the end of the day, this is still ones and zeros. Like it's amazing that it's taken this long to actually get to this. If it is that easy, it can be transported like 30 years back on that hardware. It's just yeah, it's just interesting time right now. I've seen some other things with like Raspberry Pi projects, like really small computers you can do this with. But just know that it's going to be slow. Like the interface you get on like a ChatGPT or a Gemini or a Claude right now, it's like nearly instant. You can almost read along as it's going. Slower computers, it's going to be like word by word because it's the same process just slowed down. Um, anyway, I see we have about a half hour left, so I want to make sure we get some. I have some questions for both of you based on the talk, the kickoff SUVs last time. And we've kind of already talked about these a little bit, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts. So the first one is this came up I think early in the Q&A. It was about is science fiction the best term to use? Like is that kind of are we talking about one sort of maybe the original science fiction sort of writing where it was a little more like you know us in the future 100 years sort of like the futurism type sci-fi versus now where these are stories that are kind of part real part fantastical but also um is there a better word to use for this? And this kind of touches on the next one too, but I'm curious. And it's very appropriate too because we're right next to the sci-fi section right
Right.
here in Mitchell
Right.
Park. So um, I don't know. Either you've thought of this before. Have you heard from like customers about
Jump in.
like you know?
Well, I really like the idea of speculative fiction that was brought up earlier. I haven't really
Mm,
thought of it in that way, but it's true, like this could be a potential future and this is where I could see it possibly going. I like that kind of renaming of science fiction. I feel like, yeah, for me that would be a better terminology
mm,
for it, and I feel like it also opens it up more um, for people that are intimidated by like science fiction if they're looking to read it or to write it. I mean, it's
yeah.
just more of what it could be. So
Is part of this also like I feel like sort of the movies and Hollywood is sort of taking like we think of sci-fi as like a certain type of movie and a certain which
Right.
has a
Gotta
certain
be
type of book that
aliens,
goes
and
with
there's
it.
gotta be a fight,
Yeah,
and yeah.
yeah, and although I haven't read it yet, it sounds like Mountain in the Sea is kind of like a good example of this, where
Yeah.
it is.
more speculative in
Yeah.
terms of posing some questions and exploring them, and that technology is certainly an agent in the narrative, but it's not the only thing driving the narrative.
I don't know if there's is this a thing in libraries too, where we're like kind of recategorizing genres and like I mean I think of like the displays
Well,
that you
yeah,
do. It's sort of like
it
maybe it's
happens all the time.
Yeah.
Like, but I also
Yeah.
like, for example, like with young adult literature, now we have middle grade, which I think is great because, you know, an 11-year-old, well, they're not really juvenile, but they're
Yeah.
not really like ready for a high school novel yet. And there's just a huge appetite in the readers that I see, just at Rinconada, of readers who were like 9 through 12, who just like, you know, even the parents like, I can't give me more recommendations. They're like, they will just, you know, give them a series, boom, you know, they're done.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I like this concept of middle grade. Like, if you look at the novelist database and like all the different categories that you can break things down into,
Available in the A to Z list.
is available on the A to Z list. I love that database. It's so much fun. But yeah, like
yeah, they have a lot of
yeah. So like,
Sorry.
if you're looking at fictions, are we looking at romance or western, or are we looking at my favorite phrase, epistolary? You know, novels that are basically like a series of letters between characters.
Oh.
Yeah. So for me, the more metadata, the better. You know? And also, like, I like Internet Movie Database. Because I'm always, you know, I'm interested, like, well, how are they building that? You know, you might also like algorithm. It's like, okay, well, if I liked this, you know, what is it in the description of the other things? Or is it, or you're just trying to get me to stream that and get my $5, you know?
Okay, so I have to do a random book recommendation right now because we just mentioned. So it's called You Have Not Yet Heard Your Favorite Song, and it's by a person, Glenn McDonald, who I just coincidentally happened to share an office with once as an intern, so it's really cool for me that way anyway. But Glenn used to, you know, book title here, Glenn was the data alchemist at Spotify before he was kind of left last year, works on AI projects now. But it goes into exactly this, like, where do all those categories come from? How did they, through machine learning, how did they come up with these different combinations of, you know, like 50 different types of EDM, or like, you know, Glenn's really into sort of like Scandinavian death rock stuff too. So there's a lot of subgenres in there also. So it came out last year, 2024. I think I have a review in here too. Yeah. But yeah, all about the sort of data science part behind the scenes going on there. He's also got some interviews on like YouTube and stuff if you want to like get a sample of the writing style first. But yeah, it's sort of funny how I mean, this also goes back to like maybe like the first sort of automation in libraries, like originally with card catalogs and like
author title,
that,
subject, that's all you had.
You had to have very defined sort of ways
You
to,
got,
you know, entry points
like,
for these things.
2 subject headings per card.
Yeah.
And so, and the headings were really broad because of the rule, if it's about more than 3 things, it gets bumped to larger heading. And, you know, so that's kind of like my superpower being a Gen X librarian.
Yeah.
I can understand how some of these older records, you know, they're representing something much fuller. So if it doesn't say it's exactly about the thing you want, it's still worth looking at. And I guess that's one of the things that I do, you know, I have concerns about, because there's so much older data with not much metadata around it. And like, you know, what are the gaps going to be of, you know, things that we already know, but that don't get, you know, pushed forward just because, you know, there's so much information to work with. But I mean, cataloging is really interesting to me, to be able to describe something succinctly. And, you know, one of the interesting things I think about Internet Movie Database is, you know, you get that movie poster right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
And, you know, there's the old saying about, well, you know, don't judge a book by its coaster, but you know, we're judging a movie by the poster, right? We're designed to be lured
Yep.
in by the poster and like the very specific placement of who are the stars and
Mm-hmm.
who what, you know, who's the studio behind it and those kinds of things. So we read a movie poster differently than we read, you know, a book jacket design. So yeah, I mean, you might want to say, okay, a book catalog and internet movie database are kind of similar because it's an index to known items, but like the level of metadata in them is so different.
And it's like, yeah, I never thought of this before. It's very similar to in the movie credits where it's like screenplay by, you know, X, Y, and Z, and like the last person listed with that ampersand, that implies I forget what that is. They were the last one who had a crack at that script or
Right,
something,
like where
or like,
you know, where did they write the whole thing, or did they
yeah,
come at the end?
yeah,
Or was it shared collaboration? Yeah.
yeah. It's and then knowing about the process of cataloging and be able to see like, yeah, the order of stuff and like how, you know, which term used. Yeah, it's just a okay. But in the interest of time here, we got. I think the next one will generate some similar discussion here. So this came up in the panel talk about AI. Like that term itself is kind of misleading in a way, or maybe it's not the best way to describe what we're doing or what's being done. Um, and then what this is like, is it the artificial part or the intelligence part that's kind of like, you know, there's been a bunch of different ways to describe this lately. People are talking about like, you know, AGI, like artificial general intelligence, as like that sort of the the thing that we see in movies being described like, oh, the smarter than human type
Skynet.
of interface, Skynet or the HAL or the yeah, it knows the answer before you ask it type of thing. But then there's also, you know, other sort of levels here that have been described. Like I think it was what OpenAI like a couple of weeks ago had they were talking about you know, there's like a level of AI that's just about like innovation. Like, can it come up with new novel ideas that have never been like combining data in a way almost like the same like a PhD level sort of intelligence where it's invented something that people have not thought of before. We're not really seeing that yet, but like you could see with enough sort of information and like the right prompting and stuff, probably gonna get there eventually. But like, is that just confusing people because we think of it one way and like the way that we're using it right now is kind of not maybe that's not most like useful for most people. I don't know.
What do you
Thoughts
think?
or
Is that?
I mean there's machine learning, that's
Yeah,
another
what
one
I
that's
was
kind
gonna
of
say.
yeah.
Yeah, machine learning makes more sense to me. I do think artificial intelligence might kind of seem weird to most people, like the intelligence aspect of it, like that part of the name. Um, but yeah, I think like what you mentioned before with AI creating something new that no one's ever thought about, that's what I would consider when if I heard artificial intelligence and never knew what it was, that's what I would
Yeah.
be thinking. But yeah, it's a good question.
And so the other way that people have talked about things like ChatGPT is like, oh, it's just a really, really smart autocomplete. Like that
Yeah.
we've had on our phones for like decades now. And like
Stupid
we've seen
autocorrect.
yeah, and we've seen the downfalls. Often in comical situations. But yeah, even autocomplete is kind of like I feel like there's some sort of middle ground there where we're just not quite getting to what we're really trying to do.
Well, then we have, you know, language being an evolving, moving target as well, because like at one time people would say World Wide Web. I don't hear that nearly as much. I think even now people say I got it online instead of even on the internet.
Yeah.
So I think the term will definitely evolve or have those different shades of meaning, like electric vehicle versus electric car. But I think the you know, the term for it will definitely go through some iterations.
Mm.
'Cause even like paring it down to AI, um, finding the acronyms.
Yeah.
But I think there is this expectation of cognition, of that rather than just pattern matching and linked data, that it's generating thought. And
Yeah.
and if you look at programs that can make a new image,
Mm.
well, is it conscious, is it sentient, or is it just mashing up the data that was fed to it? So I think there's a lot of like fine layers of meaning, that it's true, we hit the gas kind of fast and throw a term on it and keep going.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like, it's almost like there's two tracks right now, where it's like the AI assistant stuff, where, I mean, that's like the Siri and like the thing we looked at before is like, oh, it could go to a website and like find, like, you can kind of orchestrate it to do a series of clicks for you, or
Remember
like
how
create a
much
calendar or something.
everyone hated Clippy?
Yeah, or like Clippy sort of yeah, but like Clippy, just kind of
didn't work,
meant
right?
well, but like sort of yeah, and Microsoft has kind of rebranded that as like the Copilot idea. Is like it's
It's still Clippy.
it's still Clippy under the hood. Yeah.
Do you remember the moose on really early Apple computers? The moose that would like drop down to like interact with you a little bit. Yeah, they dropped the moose a long time ago. He was much cooler than Clippy, let me assure you. But I think that will be the sweet spot, is finding the interface that most people find useful. Like my example earlier of, I don't want to type a sentence, other people are going to type a sentence, right?
Yeah.
So I think it will also depend, like, in specific applications, what you want your interaction to be like.
Right.
But I think that's also, we get to the, are you building it for someone and are you doing what they want?
Right.
Or are you doing what you want and saying it's for them?
And there's a lot of technology out there, like assistive technology, where it doesn't make sense maybe for you, but there's so many people out there that would, like, their quality of life would increase, like,
that it would benefit enormously. Yeah. And so I think being able to say the application of technology from not your own perspective is huge. That's accepting the usefulness of an application, even if it doesn't specifically apply to you.
I mean, the first one that came to mind was, like, it was demoed at the CES, the Consumer Electronics Show, like a month ago, where that video player VLC is going to have a feature now where it will translate to any language. Any video that you play at it will have that built in. So it's kind of, I mean, for us in libraries, like, we've got the movies, but, depending on which distributor it's from or where it was, which country published it, it might only have like 3 or 4 alternative languages in there. But we'd have like every language possible. And by the way, this is also running on your computer too. It wasn't like giving up your privacy by like, oh, I'm watching this movie right now. It's connecting to a database and like getting subtitles, sort of generating them like on the fly, with some accuracy too. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff like that where, and just like even just real-time translation would be. There's another sci-fi thing. That's the Babelfish and Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, right? It's sort of like the.
I mean, that's like that's the dream of like solving the problem of communication and misunderstanding. That because we do have all the human nuances of tone and expression and delivery, that and it's sort of like the optical character recognition. Yeah, we can do it, but it's like every time I hear a map technology say El Camino Real, it's like we're living in Silicon Valley. It's El Camino Real. It's like, come on, So I think there's going to be like, are we expecting it to be human, or are we expecting it just to be like a tool for aiding? Not expecting art, but like if I need directions or I need instructions that are accurate, not necessarily an artistic delivery, but are going to get me where I need to go or help me do what I need to do. I think we also have to like qualify some expectations too. It's sort of like with streaming and bandwidth. It's like, well, how much do you want to spend, right? Do you want to be able to broadcast this with no hiccups to 5,000 people, or broadcast it with no hiccups to 50? And so, I think, you have to balance the excitement of visionary possibilities with the, all right, what is it going to cost to roll this out and how do we scale it? So, which I think is what they do here, right?
Yeah. So I've heard. Yeah. Well, we're, believe it or not, we're like close to 15 minutes left on our, so we've been going. Once you get librarians talking, time goes by fast. But this last one I think is a good one to end on. I forget who mentioned this one. There was a round of Q&A where they're talking about like your favorite technology or something like that. And someone mentioned books as a technology itself, which I thought was kind of there's so many ways that we could take this idea, like books as a storage of information. Are we talking about the printing press and that, like the revolution of print, like mechanical type and stuff, or is it just the idea of like having collections, like how far do we go back? Is it the scroll library, like that sort of level? Is it the collection of having lots of clay tablets together, like those sort of, we are in some ways we're in the business of like storing knowledge in a physical form,
right, in a lasting form.
Yeah.
And there was a news article I saw just this morning about an archaeological find in Syria that moves the date of known alphabets back by some hundreds of years.
Yeah.
And so if we are trying to figure out like when did humans like develop this tool of written language that could be understood without the person who wrote it standing next to you explaining it.
Yeah.
That's something that we're constantly striving for, is that understanding and lastingness, right? So it is a challenge to think about, just because we have already seen the decline of so many computers that aren't sold with compact disk drives anymore. But people still come to the library saying, I was given my medical files on this disk. How can I use it? Right? So, or for people who spend a lot of time, say like digitizing slides and uploading them.
Yeah.
And now it's like, okay, well now I need to pay for the data storage. How long do I want to keep paying, $70 a year for something that I don't know, I could download, but will there always be USB ports on my computer, just like CD drive? Yeah, so the flip side of that, not to be the big downer.
And
here.
we've had some some real life experiences with that in this room, in fact, every Wednesday. The Vintage Media Lab.
Right, with videotapes, cassette tapes, like that's and that's why the book has had the lasting power. It's already proven itself to be able to survive centuries and to be able to be restored after floods. That it's a mighty technology just for its durability, and so the durability factor will definitely come into play.
But notice that we haven't switched from paper pulp for like a very long time, so it's sort of a it's just strange to think about. Like that became the sort of de facto way to have thoughts outside of your head. It was like it's ink on paper. They just happen to be in a certain
order,
certain order, and in a nice handheld fashion that we can have thousands of volumes here, on display.
Right.
Yeah, and I think even today, a lot of people do prefer the physical copies to the ebooks. So, it's a great way to share those ideas and information. Just like, here you go, you have it. Now it's yours.
It's available when the power goes out. Like there's a
Yeah.
lot of really
Yeah.
good things to. But okay, if we're gonna put on our sci-fi hats for a second, can you imagine some sort of future book format that doesn't exist yet? I have one that I've been thinking about with LLMs that might be to kind of spark your brainstorming session here. If you can imagine a book that contains every version of that book in it somehow. Like there were a lot of early sort of experiments where people are like talk to your PDF type projects where you could upload documents and then have a chat with it. But then like having it wouldn't even be a PDF. I don't know. It's kind of like if you think of like the way that the internet is hypertext and it's all linked together, but having a version that links all the different variations of that same story and like I'm imagining like in Google Maps, where you can do like the slider where it does like here's Middlefield Road like 50 years ago and it's nothing's here, or actually 100 years ago nothing's here. You're in the middle of a field. Or maybe it'll be something like I mean, you can imagine like a like book to video sort of thing. We have image, or sorry, like a text to image thing right now. Your prompt will generate an image. But will there be a future where it's like we instantly are creating Hollywood versions of stories because it's breaking down all the scenes and the characters and it's like doing that sort of like on the fly sort of thing. I don't think it's that far away, but it does seem like an impossible sort of thing to do because just be like, I mean, it already takes so much effort to like do a movie adaptation already of a story, but like having that in some sort of like an on-demand format, that'd be, yeah, I don't know.
Well, I
Or
think
like,
about
oh,
the satisfaction of interactive books like pop-up books.
oh yeah,
And like, what are
yeah,
some of the new materials that you can lift out? Something like if they're describing a bowl that you could like, the paper engineering is incredible that is available now. And I'm thinking in particular about the artist named Colette Fu, who does like room size installation pop-up books. Like it's so big that when you
I
open
gotta
it
look
up,
this up.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's amazing that you would open it up and something huge unfolds, because paper is an incredible material, and you can make it out of so many different fibers. But I think the size of a book really generates different responses. Like if it's a miniature book, you can hold in your hand, and it feels really magical. Or if it's a book that like has the kind of pages that fold out, then you get the kind of the pleasure of folding it back up and moving on.
Yeah.
Like if it's a map or if it's an illustration you fold out, like it becomes part of that mental processing. And that's why books with maps as end papers are so
Ooh.
charming. Yeah. So what if you could have, because also, if you want it to stay intact and be handled, like what are the materials that will like most of the library pop-up books
Yeah.
live a very tough life. They live in service,
Yeah.
but some of those things are not going to come back the
Yeah.
same way. But yeah, I think like book arts, also with printing. I went to when they used to do Book Expo. One time I went, and there was a printer from China who had just this huge book. You couldn't even imagine like what kind of printer did they need to print these beautiful huge plates. Like it took two people to turn a page. It was like an elephant photo. It was that big. So I think there's a lot of interesting things that'll happen with printing and with paper engineering too.
Gosh, and I'm just looking at some of these.
Oh, the pop-up
Yeah,
installations.
Cliff Foods
Yeah.
pop-up books are. They're really. Yeah, I think of like those. They like the Sanborn maps, where it's like the old school
Fire
like street stuff.
insurance,
Yeah, where
with like things layered on top
Yeah.
of them. And Julie Chen of Flying Fish Press, she does some really beautiful books. and those are ones that also have a 3D component. And when you turn the
Yeah.
page, like something lifts out, but the text is printed like inside. Like you have to really interact with the book to really read everything that's there.
And there's also actually we have one back in the office there. It's like an augmented reality books where you get like you point your phone at it and it does like a virtual pop-up sort of thing going on there. Yeah, some sort of like it seems okay. We're talking more about like a book that it's enhanced by some level of like interactivity or like some. I also think of like the choose your adventure style stories too, or you can have like
page 35. You want to go down the tunnel.
Yeah, the sort of multiverse idea like in a text like that would be kind of interesting.
Yeah, I agree, especially with how you mentioned we've talked about how AI is an experience and it can learn you and your preferences. So kind of like the idea too with choose your own adventure, if it has something like computer vision and it gets so good that it can read your face and see like what's exciting about that story, that it changes the ending or what you're reading.
Yeah. Did you read faster or slower? Did you stop? Did you go look something up?
Something adaptive like that.
Yeah.
Would be really interesting.
Embellishments and like
with XR and AR like in there too. So.
That'd be so fun to. I mean, in a way, this is kind of like I mean, every time we read something, it's a different experience for each person because we've got different life experiences and like, other understandings of what we're, maybe you've read all the sci-fi similar thing. You're like, oh yeah, this is using this and that trope and like that sort of rehash of that character or archetype or stuff. But like having that be part of it's almost too much to think about. It's like we're kind of it's like we're meshing like the idea of like a sort of interactive, like almost video game cinematic experience with these kind of
well, if you think about the what was the Oregon Trail survival game?
Oh yeah,
right? Because that's the part that humans always find enticing is exploring the dead ends or taking a risk. And we're a funny combination of creatures that crave new but also familiar. So we're driven to experience a lot of new things, but we also like things that work the way we know they work. So, but it's novelty goes a long way in drawing the human eye for sure. But I think that it's often the combination of things that people find really satisfying too.
Yeah. Actually, I had another one just pop in. Like, all those audiobooks, they're awesome because it's read by the author. Like, if there were some where it's like the author agreed to have their AI generated voice be part of that, or like
that one's really tough. Because voice is so personal, and I think actors too, because it's like they themselves. Yeah, it's not like a text that's in free domain because the author's not around and there's no vocal or visual of them performing or reading it. But that's where we really get into, I think, the thornier aspects because people feel like, well, that's my identity. It's sort of like with artists too.
And there's been what was it? Was there like a TV commercial at one point that was kind of controversial because they reused someone's likeness or that? I'm forgetting the one that.
She's Black Widow in the movie Scarlett Johansson.
Oh, that She
said, "Don't use my voice," and then they did. So.
Yeah. Oh, we've had some.
Not cool.
Already.
Not
yeah.
Cool. Don't be stealing ScarJo's voice.
No. Yeah, there was a lot. That was like.
That was really
almost
recent.
a year ago, I think.
That was really recent, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's, ownership is the big, like bowling ball that comes into all of this, right? Like who owns that pattern matching algorithm or who owns that data structure that became so useful? Who owns the images?
I'm afraid that
we out of time.
Yeah.
All right, thanks so much for letting me jump on your show.
This was wow, it went by fast. We've got 4 minutes left in our time. I think, Rebecca, were there any other events that you wanted to highlight that we went through?
Yeah, we
the
talked about
list
some of
of-
the things where
Yeah.
authors are coming, but then also the museum exhibits.
Yes.
So, but
Yeah.
I really do encourage people to spend a little time on the events calendar at SiliconValleyReads.org because you can watch the replay of
Yeah.
the panel event from last Thursday. So
Mm.
you can hear from those authors. You know, get on the hold list for the books because they're pretty
Get 'em right
popular. But yeah, make sure you have your library card. But
Yeah.
also, think about having a reading or discussion group with your friends too, because it's something we're definitely going to continue to talk about for a while, and that the more voices, the better at this point.
And I'm gonna do one quick replay of the titles. So when you see them in the world, you'll recognize them. The worlds I see, and then loneliness and company. Which it sounds like maybe this will be a movie adaptation. She didn't say anything specific
but I
about this
think
one,
that
but
it
yeah.
certainly has potential.
that's from the kickoff. And this last one here, Ray
Sea.
Naylor.
All very good reads.
Yeah.
Happy to recommend them
Oop.
all.
Wrong button.
And you'll see on the website there's also some recommended books just because these were either titles we really liked and either couldn't get the author or couldn't be 100% sure we'd get all the texts that we needed.
Yeah.
But there's so many avenues to explore in this topic. So if technology isn't generally in your reading wheelhouse, give it a try. There's a lot of interesting things out there.
And I can't wait to read all three.
Yeah.
I have one. Actually, I have two at home right now. So we'll get it going here. All right, but that's the end of the show today.
All right, thanks so much.
Bye for now, everyone. Library.cityofpaloalto.org. That's our website. So you can go there. I don't know why I just said. You know where we are.